Welcome, everybody, to Brutally Honest Talk Radio. This is Elmo the Conservative, and this is the most fun that you will have this week on a political podcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I have as a guest on the show today, Evan Jaqua. He is a member. Jaqua.
Yes.
Okay.
Jaqua.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
And because we're just coming together for the first time here, I just read a little bit about him in advance before today. This is the first time that we've had an interview or any kind of a meeting. And he is a member of the Solutions Party. And so he's gonna talk about that and educate people on it. And then we'll go into a couple other things. So hello, Evan, and how are you doing today?
I'm doing just great. I'm actually here in Portland, Oregon today. It's a beautiful day, blue sky. And so, that's the way to start off a day, a nice blue sky, not perfect temperature. And more than anything, this opportunity to speak with you, which I have been looking forward to for a while now.
Yeah. We finally got it in, and I'm glad, and I'm interested to know. So everyone knows about the Republican Party, the Democrat Party. Most people have heard of the Libertarian or the Green Party, but there's also there's an organization called Solutions Party, and I love solutions, especially as a man. We have to fix things and make things better, and that's how progress is made. That's why life today is much different than it was 100 years ago. So solutions are a good thing, but I'm going to let you talk and just let people know about this Solutions Party.
I'll be honored I'm honored to have the opportunity to express a little bit about what this is all about. And I just wanted to confirm, though, just the topics of discussion today will be a short introduction. I want to confirm what you had in mind as a short introduction of the Solutions Party, and then we'll move on to the topic that you are particularly interested in. Is that a good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
perfect.
definitely.
Well, the whole basis of the Solution Party comes down to some really basic ideas. Ronald Reagan famously said, government is not the solution, government's the problem. And I think he's mostly right, but I think he needed to be a little more specific. I contend that the problem is our politicians. Our politicians are the root of our problem. And why is that? And it comes down to some very, very basic human weaknesses and characteristics and weaknesses. The human brain, for as marvelous as it is, forms addictions very easily. It forms addictions to alcohol, to drugs, to gambling, to video games, social media, to you name it. But probably the most addictive thing of all is power. People get addicted to power. As George W. Bush said, power is addictive. As John Boehner, the former Speaker of the House, said, that he sees people get a little bit of power and it completely changes them. And I think that, if we look at, some of the more extreme examples of vicious power, let's look at, let's say Putin, for example. I contend that, if Vladimir Putin were painting houses in the suburbs of Moscow, he'd probably be a pretty nice guy. But the way he is now, he's, poisoning political opponents, rigging elections, and invading neighboring countries. Let's look at Kim Jong-un in North Korea. If he grew up in Hawaii surfing, he probably wouldn't be the same guy who sends entire families to unimaginably brutal prison camps. Let's look at the Assad, the Syrian dictator. If he were driving taxis in New Jersey, he'd probably be a pretty nice guy. He probably wouldn't be dropping barrel bombs on civilians. So when people get addicted to power, they will do anything to keep it. And our politicians are not immune to that. And so once they get in power, what is their priority? Their priority is staying in office. How often have you heard, well, such and such, this politician is not up for re-election, so he or she can vote their conscience. And you think, what? Shouldn't they always be voting their conscience? Why is it re-election is their priority? Are we sending people to represent us where their first priority is staying in office? I would rather having them concentrate on doing their jobs. And so, if you were a company and you had a contract with an employee for 4 years, and that employee spent half the time on the job every day just lobbying for a contract extension, I doubt you'd be very, very pleased. And so the only way to handle this is the same way that a doctor would. For example, Elmo, if I were your doctor and I had to prescribe to you something very, very addictive, well, what would be the way to do it in a way that you wouldn't get addicted? Well, you give it in small portions spread apart. And so that's exactly what we have to do with political power. Allocate it in small portions spread apart. Because the minute you have re-election in the mix, that becomes the priority. That becomes what they focus on. And that and very closely correlated that their partisan interests, how much of their time spending, raising money for their political parties on our dime, by the way.
Yeah.
And so we need to do a couple of things. We need to do various things, but one of the things we have to do is we have to end re-election. And another thing we have to do is we have to put a lifetime limit on political parties, because what they have become, instead of being, in an ideal world, a political party would be a vehicle under which people of similar ideas could organize and offer candidates accordingly. But what it is now, they become just completely tribal. And this is shown in our current presidential election. Isn't it kind of weird that a few counties outside of Milwaukee, or a few counties outside of Atlanta, or a few counties outside of Philadelphia matter more than all of California, matter more than all of Texas, matter more than all of Florida or New York? It's absolutely insane. Our politicians are the candidates running for president should be looking for votes in every corner of the country, 50 states. There should be no winner take all, so California, Trump's not even going to campaign there. Harris is not even going to campaign in Texas. It's just crazy. This but I guess my point here is that this tribalism actually benefits our current political parties, because instead of having to allocate resources nationwide, they just have to allocate resources in about 20 purple counties in a handful of purple states. Mm-hmm. And it becomes just a battle to skim off that ever smaller undecided vote. And it shouldn't be that way. I can remember when I was living in Utah, rural Utah, for a while. And this was back in the mid 70s. I was just a teenager. People could talk about, well, are you going to vote for Carter? Are you going to vote for Ford? And, they would have a civil discussion about it. But now it's like, if you're one or the other, you're just going to be automatically, part of the tribe or ostracized viciously. Our politics should not be like that. So the fundamental ideas behind the Solution Party is let's eliminate re-election. Let's put a 12-year limit on our political parties, as along with a whole host of other ideas that we need to, ideas that are meant to address the weaknesses, the current weaknesses in our democracy. Our democracy, is a wonderful thing, and a well-functioning democracy will actually increase prosperity for us all. So I'm sorry, that's kind of a long-winded.
No, let me ask you about the terms, and there shouldn't be re-election, and with presidents just having, or maybe you feel this way about Congress too, that they should just be able to serve for one term.
Exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then that is with the same length that it is now, 4 years, or is that a different length term?
Well, I think that could be up for discussion. For example, I do believe 2 years for Congress is too short. I think it should be 3 years. I think 6 years for Senate is fine. I would probably be more in favor of having a 5-year presidential term. That's something that could be discussed in more detail. But just superficially stated, I would prefer to have Congress, somebody elected for 3 years, so that they have a little more time to, kind of learn the ropes and, be more effective, or get more effective, and then, move on.
Evan, do you believe that if there was one term for presidents, that they would go in serving the people more because they knew that they wouldn't be reelected, or in a traditional sense of politics being an acquisition and maintenance of power, that they know going in, when they're running for president, they don't even need to get in this or be a part of this unless they're really just focusing on whatever the themes or the policies or the goals are, because they're not really in there long enough to move their furniture in and hang pictures on the wall.
Yeah, I think the message is this to all. I have an article called "What If Political Power Came in a Pill," and it sort of addresses this. And this, the message to anybody aspiring to elected office would be the following: you're going to have one chance to make a difference in our country and make your mark on history. So, are you going to go in there with the idea of doing the best you can for the country, or are you going to go in there with some, motives, selfish motives? And so, I think, for example, let's look at like toward the end of the Trump administration, where they wanted to, or not, this is not to pick on Donald Trump. This is what all administrations have done, where they wanted to get out of Afghanistan because they thought it would help them in the election. And I just don't think that we should be making decisions of that important on whether or not it's going to help the election or not.
Right.
And, what's going on in the Middle East right now, the Biden administration is undoubtedly making political calculations about what to do in a way that's going to help Kamala Harris the most. Now, is that really what the priority should be? Or should the priority actually be, getting in there and trying to solve this very difficult problem, regardless of how politically popular it is or not? And so many of our, the decisions being made are first of all, okay, how's it going to affect such and such reelection prospects? How
100%.
How is it going to affect our ability to keep the House or to keep the Senate? Just this stuff that should not be the first priority at all.
Yeah. Even the pandemic, when you look at how that was weaponized and turned into a political football by politicians, and then
exactly
these media networks, they jump on that train and make that the focus, and then it becomes attacking. What are you doing, and why did you do this? When really you're getting into uncharted waters, dealing with something that you never have before. And literally, like Indiana Jones, I'm figuring this out as I go, one day at a time or 1 week at a time, with the leaders and the scientists and the pharmaceutical companies trying to work together, because they saw things under a microscope that they didn't recognize or hadn't seen before,
right?
And had to study it and figure it out and do a lot of tests. Unfortunately, even though less people died with 9/11, 9/11 brought us together more as a country, and we weren't imploding and turning toward each other.
Well, this is the problem also. This is one of the reasons why I was very much against having Vice President Pence being in charge of the effort, to respond to COVID, because he was a politician who was up for re-election. And so that's going to, that's why after the first wave, he said, well, there's not going to be a second wave. Absolutely not. Everything was done. And I'm not picking on him in particular, because all politicians do this with re-election in mind. And in those sorts of national emergencies, be it a pandemic or be it a war or whatever, politics should not be at all the priority. It's the priority has to be doing the best to solve the problem and move forward. And then, you get, please, sorry.
No, let me ask you this. So if that were true and the politicians in there, let's say for 5 years, one term, do you feel that their staff, that everyone that went in there with them, they need to also leave and move out? Because I feel like many politicians, they're being pressured and given their marching papers by the party, by people that are off camera, putting pressure on them with a group telling one or two people what they should say next and the way that you should handle this thing that's coming up next week.
Yeah, but all of that is usually given through the lens of politics. All of that is usually given through the lens of helping that politician stay in power, helping that politician get reelected, and helping the politician's party, the interests of their political party. And, this is what we want to get rid of. This is what we don't want in the equation anymore. We want our elections, and we want our elected officials to focus on ideas and vision, and let the people decide. So when two people are running for an office, let them explain in a respectful, honest, clear way what their ideas and vision are, and as well as the other. and then let the voters decide. Instead of right now, what we have is what I like to call them fourth-rate salespeople. I've done a lot of different jobs. One of the jobs I've done is sales, and you have different levels of salespeople. The really good ones are the ones who know their product, they know their competition's product, they can speak respectfully about their product and about the competition's product, but they can make the case why their product is a better investment. Then you have the other side of the coin, the fourth-rate salespeople who will say anything to make the sale, no matter how outrageous, no matter how false. And usually those people last about 3 weeks in their job. And what we have now is our politicians are basically fourth-rate salespeople, people who will say anything to get elected and to stay in power.
Yeah.
And we don't want that anymore. We want to have people who are going to be honest with their ideas, be honest about what their opponents stand for too. I actually lived in a communist country for a while. I was a member of a family that suffered brutally under communism. When I hear people saying, well, Kamala Harris is a Marxist communist, it's actually quite disturbing to me because I have heard the screams of people at night when they're reliving in their nightmares what they went through
The real thing.
in a communist prison. And if I thought for 1 second that this country was going to go communist, I'd be the first to raise the red flag. But when they just start saying, this guy's, communist, or this guy's, Nazi, or, just these over the top, completely, what it basically comes down to is emotion manipulation. That's what our elections have gone down to. More than focusing on ideas, they're more focusing on manipulating the emotions of the electorate in any way that they can, regardless of how wild and over the top the things they say.
Yeah. Tell me about the Solutions Party as far as on what scale or what level they may be seeking office. So is this in local, statewide, as well as maybe going for the White House? What has been kind of, the history of that and where they are now?
But the idea is real simple. Right now is to get our ducks in order idea-wise, and we've proposed a lot of different ideas on our blog, and then take the show on the road. And then hopefully, I believe that the country is really ripe for these ideas. I think we're all sick of the way our politics operates now. And I would like to think that once we build up a head of steam and we get people interested in these ideas and believing in these ideas, and these ideas are, they're not about any one individual. These are ideas that, I'm personally am not seeking office, even though, I certainly haven't discounted the idea. But for me, the focus is on getting these ideas out and hopefully getting other people interested in joining and starting a real grassroots effort to build this up.
Okay, I see. All right. And then I guess we could go into now talking about your ideas with the war on drugs. Something that's been a problem. I guess fentanyl is the worst thing now. The biggest thing I heard that every time somebody takes it, they have like a 50% chance of dying. It is so lethal. And we could tell stories about that, but just it's something that came from China or made in China and then comes into the country through Mexico, the Mexican cartel. And it's so dangerous. It makes you wonder, the chemists and the people who make this drug, they have to know how lethal it is. Is that part of the intention? Is this, like an attack from outside the country?
Well, let me just say one thing. I spent personally a lot of time in Peru, and I have a friend who works in customs in Peru. And she was telling me a couple months ago how they seized fentanyl from China, that it's on its way to the U.S. Now, let me just say a couple of things about this war on drugs. It was started by President Nixon. Now, Nixon was not a dummy. He was a very smart man, had sort of a twisted personality, but he was a very smart man. He had to have known that a war on drugs would be about as successful as a war on alcohol was during Prohibition. In other words, a complete
Yeah.
failure. All prohibition did, it didn't stop people from drinking. It just made it the business of the criminals and the gangsters. He had to have known that a war on drugs would not be successful. It would just enable the cartels, the gangsters, the criminals. The whole point, as some of his advisors later confessed, the whole point of the war on drugs was really political, to go after people, especially in his perceived political enemies, like people of color. And if you think about it, okay, you red line off people of color, put them in zones that have no investment, very poor schools, no opportunity, and then you throw in the possibility of the only way to make money is through drugs, selling drugs. Yeah, it's sort of like the pieces are in place to
Hmm.
cause unimaginable suffering. The way we have it now, here in Portland, Oregon, by the way, if I get on the public transportation, it's like being on an asylum on wheels. You at least have 40% or 50% of the people with some either substance abuse issue or some mental health issue or both. Right now,
Visibly. Wow.
we have this crazy situation where millions of addicted Americans are sending billions of dollars to the cartels. And these cartels absolutely control the countries where they operate because they have so much money.
Right.
So they bribe the politicians, they bribe the police, they bribe the armed forces, they bribe the judges, they extort businesses. If you want to know why we have a problem at the border, that is one of the big reasons. So,
Yeah.
as anybody knows who's in business, the best business to be in is one in which your customers are addicted to your product. Ask the tobacco companies, ask the liquor companies,
Yeah. Right.
ask the casinos. And this is the best business to be in for these cartels, because once somebody's addicted, they're going to be, seeking out your product regularly. And so the chemists that you referred to, yes, they've designed their product to be virtually instantly addictive. They've got the money and the resources to do the research to make these chemicals that people are ingesting instantly addictive. And that's once they're addicted, once they're hooked, that's that. And as a fact, these things are so devastating that they actually they pretty much destroy the brain very quickly. And once the brain is destroyed, there's very little hope for any future that
Yeah.
person's going to be productive. And so the only way to really, this idea of the heavy-handed law enforcement approach has been a miserable failure. We have not stopped drugs from coming in. As a matter of fact, things are worse than they used to be. I know my daughter was going to college and recently, and she was telling me about all the kids who were hooked on fentanyl. Now, when I went to college, there were a few potheads, couple of guys there, but we knew that they would smoke pot, but it was nothing like that. The war on drugs has been an absolute failure. So what's the way to solve it? The way to solve it is you have to destroy the economics. If you destroy the economics, the business collapses.